Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for this live stream and the discussion we're about to have. I'm Paris Gashahe, your moderator for today, and also the producer of this documentary, which I did alongside my colleague, Elijah Kani. He could not be able to join us today, but he sent his regards. And of course, with the support of the great team at African Censored, we're very thankful that you could join us today. I can see we already have a lot of engagement in the comments, and we'll be answering some of your questions as we move along. But first, allow me to introduce our panelists for the day. They're already here, and I'll give them a few seconds each to introduce themselves, and then as they do that, they can also tell a quick review of what was going through their minds as they watched this. And I'll start with you, Nelly.
I wouldn't want to say it's a good evening. I just watched what I watched. It's heartbreaking at this point in time to see that girls and women can still go through this. So my name is Nelly Mnyasia. I'm the Executive Director, Reproductive Health Network Kenya. And yeah, a strong support of access to safe abortion. Like I said, it's really heartbreaking at this point in time when we are denying our women and girls, access to services while we have all the tools that we need, and they're very clear in terms of when and how they can access these services. So really, I, as a healthcare provider also, and just a voice of a network of healthcare providers across the country, and also, presenting my fellow advocates and activists, the law is clear, Paris. At this time and point, we can't be losing women and girls. It's sad hearing stories of girls being given Magadi soda, girls having to be pressed their stomachs, foreign, sticks being introduced through their private parts for them to, access services. And how we even as a society, give so much publicity to quacks, while we understand very well that we have healthcare providers who the Constitution is very clear and has allowed them to provide these services. Really, that should not be happening at this point in time. So just listening through for the 45 minutes, we have gotten it all wrong as a society, and it's high time we need to do the right thing for women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. Victor?
My name is Victor Rasugu, and I work for Network for Adolescent and Youth of Africa as the Executive Director. And I think it's a very horrific evening that, and the entire documentary present broken facets in different levels in terms of the regulatory framework where quacks have been allowed then to ruin the reproductive lives of women, and especially young women. And these are people contributing to 7 deaths daily, and we're taking this lightly. It also brings forth the issues around gender-based violence. For example, the lady who said I had to have sex with the quack for them to be able to procure an abortion. It also brings the aspect of broken social system where, the father took the girl and went somewhere, and they said, I want nothing to do with the man. I just want them to go to a quack and procure an abortion. And then the other thing is it brings also already a strain in our healthcare system. When you talk about almost 439 million a year, that's a lot of money. And what we are doing as a country is we are treating the symptoms, but not the root cause of the problem. So how then do we work more proactively moving forward to allow women to access safe and legal abortion within the confines of the Constitution and within the policy framework? And I think that's the discussion we need to have and look at. How then do we ensure that all these young people and all these women of reproductive age can be taken care of at an early stage. We can have all this access to information to allow them then to meaningfully contribute to the development of this country. I'll give this chance to Council Kanjama. Charles, just tell us briefly, I mean, what takes in your mind when you see that video, and just give us also the legal jobs as we move along. Thank you.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Victor. I think there has been an ongoing discussion, more like a debate, about where the right to life of the child ends and where the right to health of the mother begins. And I think we need to reframe the discussion or the dialogue, because neither of them should affect the other. I think the attempt to kind of like play the right to life of the child against the right to health of the mother has been the problem. And the reality is that many people, advocates for human rights, come into this dialogue from one of the two perspectives. Either they focus so much on the right to life of the child that they do not recognize the fact that there are cases where the right to health of the mother is affected, or they focus so much on the right to health of the mother that they ignore the fact that there is a child who has a right to life. What seems to me to be fairly distinctive about the Constitution of Kenya is that it has attempted to mediate between these two positions, and it has recognized very expressly the right to life of the child. And the provision of the Constitution that deals with abortion considers abortion as a limitation to the right to life. In other words, the Constitution is like suggesting to us the starting point should be, can we safeguard both the life of the mother and the life of the child? Both of them are entitled to life. Can't we recognize that? Can't we love them both? And it seems to me that the documentary we have seen with the cases of ladies who are desperately looking for an abortion is arising from that kind of like approach where we are putting the mother against the child and the child against the mother. And we need to transcend that approach and adopt the approach which I think Dr. Kagia mentioned in her previous contributions, that the health of the mother and the child normally are aligned. And where there are misalignments for medical reasons, the medical practitioner should resolve them as a medical issue. And where the reason why there is misalignment for social reasons, then social workers should assist the mother and the stakeholders in society to uphold both her own life and health and the life and health of the child. So for me, I think we need to go beyond the debate we've had in the past about pro-abortion, anti-abortion, pro-life, anti-life, and say that we are in favor of life for both the mother and the child, of health for both the mother and the child, and to think, what are the interventions beyond the law that we can put in place to reduce these instances where the mother chooses based on her own views or sociological pressure or psychological pressure or environmental issues to do away with the child who is already living within her for 9 months of gestation. That's my preliminary thinking.
Thank you very much, Charles, for your insights. So, Dr. Kagevon, as you're doing this and as a practitioner, what quickly runs into your mind?
Yes, when you look at that clip, you see what happens on the ground in some cases. And as I had alluded to a little bit earlier in the clip, that pregnancy that is sending somebody to an abortion against their inbuilt instinct of motherhood is not a medical problem. It is a social problem. And that we have to realize. And if you give the wrong treatment to the wrong disease, you're going to get complications. And that is why we have a lot of complications. I think in my practice, which goes to only about 4 decades, I've interacted with many, many women and many who have gone through abortions, through quacks, through qualified hands, and the end result is usually the same. When there's a complication, the woman suffers and the baby dies. And one of the things that we need to understand as we talk about safe abortion is definition of words. When you talk about safe, is safe for who? Is it for the baby or the mother? As Charles says, both of them have a right. The Constitution stands for the rights of the baby as well. Unfortunately, the WHO definition of safety does not agree with the medical or the other people's definition of safety. They talk about environment and the one who is doing it, as opposed to the safety of the person who is being done and the person they are carrying. So if you come and tell me that you are going to give a safe killing, the killing is still the same. You cannot come and say it's illegal to sexually assault women in rape. So can we organize a safe rape? The rape is wrong. So the killing of the baby is wrong. Even when the mother dies, it is still wrong. When you come to the medical point of view, and Article 26(4), the opinion of a doctor or a healthcare professional is that person who has got the skills in decision-making and management of that particular person, so that Article 43 is all covered, that you are giving the highest standard of care. When you come to me and want an opinion, I should give you the best opinion. How do I get to it? I've got to listen to you, examine you, do some investigations, and come out with my opinion to tell you this is what is happening. And because I'm qualified and skilled, you should trust me to look after you. In which case, you cannot just say anybody can have 2 minutes or 3 months of training to be skilled enough to take the life of that child who is recognized by the Constitution to have a right. I think we need to look at how do we tackle this whole issue of the unplanned pregnancy. I'll look at it in 4 ways. I want to think in terms, how do you prevent it? Who is educating these young girls? Are they being educated at home? Are they being educated in their churches, in the schools, to prevent that pregnancy? Are they being supported if they get pregnant? Because it's an unplanned pregnancy. Are they getting the social support they need? Fortunately, we recognize this in my organization. I'm the chair of Protecting Life Movement Trust in Kenya, and we look after girls who have been rejected because they are pregnant and they are thrown away by the parents and guardians, and they have only an alternative of either going for an abortion or committing suicide. We take them in, we counsel them, we look after them, facilitate antenatal care and delivery. And what has surprised us is that when the parents and the guardians wake up to the fact that this was not the worst the child could have done, they are re-accepted back home. So if you look for support for these girls and give them a social support, you'll be surprised. All of them will carry the babies. In fact, even the ones who come wanting to go for adoption, they don't want the baby adopted. And we have statistics for that. The next thing is, we are going to have those issues of complications are real. Real for those who have gone for abortion through quacks, real for those people who have had miscarriages, real for those people who have gone it through, if you want to call it, through a health professional who is qualified. Complications are there. And therefore, there should be a process of giving proper post-abortion care, which will not only be physical, but will also be psychological. And that is left to the doctors, who should be able to do that because they are skilled and educated. And then the last one is to make sure that the law is enforced. If this girl has gotten pregnant, and I liked what appeared the other day in the paper, that men are going to be answering for the babies they have made outside. A long, long time ago, when some of you are not born, there used to be an affiliation law. If a person made a girl pregnant, and most of the people those days were teachers, their salaries were attached, and they looked after those babies. So if we enforce the law to make sure that this child who is conceived and the mother has a social problem, the father who is recognized by the Children's Act, that this child has a mother and a father, whether they are married or not, that child will be looked after. And if the person doesn't look after them, the law goes after them. And therefore, if we look at all these multifaceted ways, we shall be able to look after our girls, educate them enough. We'll be able to give them support if they get pregnant. We shall be able to look after them should they end up with miscarriages and abortions. And we shall be able to give the support of the law so that this girl can continue with her life. And she doesn't have to go through quacks because she's desperate. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Just quickly, Nelly, this is to you. I mean, as somebody who operates a network of healthcare practitioners and all over the country, and Dr. has pointed out a few issues that, whether safe or unsafe, the end result is the same. And the other example Dr. has given is that we cannot, for example, look at gender-based violence, for example, and say this is a safe gender-based violence. So just looking at that and highlighting that, and then also looking at then what encompasses health. Just help us unpack this.
Oh, thank you so much, Victor, and thank you, Dr. Kagia and Council Kanjama. So the definition of WHO, which is also adapted in 2019 during the JMM ruling, was health was considered to be social, emotional, physical, and all that, which we totally understand. And we want to move away from making abortion a social issue, and we want it to make it a health issue. WHO, provides that every individual has a right to decide freely and responsibly without discrimination, coercion, and violence. And for me, it's coercion. As a woman who comes to you as a healthcare provider, and we are looking again at the Health Act, Section 6. And during the screening, we just saw Linda Kroger from Kelin bring it out very well. Every person has a right to reproductive healthcare. Healthcare providers healthcare shall be provided by a trained healthcare. And it goes back to, explain, just as Article 26.4 has explained, who is a trained healthcare provider: a doctor, a nurse midwife, a clinician, and a gynecologist. And it further explains that any procedure shall be performed in a legally recognized health facility with an enabling environment. And this is just consisting of the bare minimum. We want human resource, we want infrastructure, we want commodities and supply. So what we are seeing right now is we are denying women to make choices. And for us healthcare providers, we know what our role is. It is very clear. And I like that Dr. Kagia has said that when a woman or a girl comes to a facility, you're definitely supposed to take history, do physical examination, take the client to for testing and all that. And while you're taking history as a healthcare provider, you are also assessing the mental well-beingness of this client, the social well-beingness of this client, the physical, etc., etc. And you are not the one coercing the client into making the decision. And when the client says they need services, then it is very clear. And this is not a decision that is being made by a provider. It is just your responsibility and your constitutional right as a healthcare provider to make sure that you are making everything conducive for this client to access these services. When we look at Kenya, and I would want to look at some of the issues that have contributed to backstreet, is because of these conversations that we continue to have every day in terms of it is the child has a right, the mother has a right, etc., etc. As a healthcare provider, who is your client? By the time we have the client coming to, a woman or a girl coming to you, who is your client at that particular time? And it is again very clear. Then we have given a lot of room for unqualified providers, and we've seen them operate freely. And I couldn't explain better than what we've seen during the screening. And we know that at the lowest level in the communities, in the villages where most of us, of course, came from, we have the people that are operating there are mid-level healthcare providers. In 2019, when there was a ruling and there was the reinstatement of the standards and guidelines, and also the national training curriculum on the management of unintended and risky and unplanned pregnancies, it was very clear that we needed to train healthcare providers more, and more importantly, the mid-level providers, because they're the ones that come into contact every day with these women and girls that need these services. So our responsibilities as healthcare providers is to make the information, one, available, and this can only be available through the Ministry of Health, ensuring that they are implementing the standards and guidelines that support in reducing the morbidity and mortalities related to unsafe abortion. And number two, they are ensuring that the national training curriculums for the management of unintended and risky and unplanned pregnancies are being implemented. Providers, both from government and public facilities, are being provided the information. And we also have commodities. We are talking about Medabon, etc., etc. So our role as healthcare providers is to, what does the Health Act ask us to do? What does the Constitution, Article 26 ask us to do? What is the W recommendation for women and girls in need of in need of safe abortion services? And all the other, laws, treaties that Kenya has ratified to. We just need to align to that and ensure that we are not seeing the seven digits daily that can be controlled through providing information. And this is through providing the right information and providing options, choices for women and girls, because I believe they know better what is right for them. Thank you, Victor.
To Nelly, Victor, Dr. Kagia, as well as Charles, the discussion that's going on in the chat is perhaps premised in what Charles, you had mentioned. So I'll probably start with you in terms of a very one against the other sort of argument when it comes to unsafe abortions. But I think what's also the urgent question that is raised by this documentary in very, very unsettling ways is what happens right now as this debate continues, as the debate about how to be able to progress with ensuring the safety of the mother, ensuring the safety of the child, or perhaps including more expanded abortion or health and safety rights. What happens now to those ladies who are in Kakamega, who are in various parts of the country, who are at risk, who have been perhaps in sexual encounter?
And that's a great
these services in one way or another.
Yeah, that's a great question, John Allen, because that is always the issue that policy makers have to grapple with. What I can say from the perspective of law is that law doesn't help us to resolve all situations. It's not perfect. For example, we have very rigorous laws against murder and manslaughter. and other forms of deliberate taking of life. But we find there are still people committing murder. There are still people committing manslaughter. There are people committing rape. So are we able, from a perspective of sociology or criminology, to use law as a tool and completely eliminate crime? The answer is no. Are we able to completely take away the risk that somebody is going to be killed unlawfully or even on the roads today? There was a time I served on the board of National Transport and Safety Authority when it was immediately set up. And we were really concerned that you had almost 3,000 deaths per year. Kenya had a significantly high number of road fatalities. What policy measures could we put in place? And we put a lot of effort to try and reduce policy measures. I'm using this as an analogy. But we noticed that some of the policy measures that would succeed, like reducing overnight passenger transport, would have very serious repercussions on the economy and on the society. So there was a time when the Minister for Transport banned overnight passenger transport and the fatality numbers went down. But Kenyans complained, of course. So there are various policy measures that were being put in place. The solution, the conclusion is that they did not reduce deaths to zero. So now coming to the question of abortion, unsafe abortion and safe abortion, I think the Constitution of Kenya, when you read it critically, Article 26 has transcended that debate between safe and unsafe abortion. And the reason it has done so is that it has recognized that both the mother and the child have the right to life. So it is basically recognizing that anytime you have an abortion, somebody's right to life has been taken away, at least the right to life of the child. In some cases, also the right to life of the mother. So the Constitution is saying, let us adopt an approach, even incrementally, that helps us to rescue the lives of both the mother and the child. So that the mentality of saying, no, because at the moment we cannot save the child, let us save the mother and leave the child to fend for themselves in the interim period, is something that we could have discussed in the old days. So my feeling is that the approach that would work, which is where we recognize that all abortions are unsafe for the child and many abortions are also unsafe for the mother, is first of all an approach where we try to reduce that demand. It's not a demand that is in accordance with the law, but you can still call it a demand, that demand for abortions. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to put in place mechanisms, whether it is healthcare mechanisms, whether it is legal justice mechanisms, that can identify those who generate the demand for these abortions which are unsafe, either for the mother, the child, or both, and target them as a way of reducing that demand. And then number three, I would say this, even though I'm not a medical practitioner, there are many cases where somebody has committed a crime and ends up in a hospital. The doctor cannot refuse to save that person who was committing a crime because they have suffered some injury. That is not the human rights approach or the medical approach. So matters that have to do with post-abortion care, which means it doesn't matter, the crime has been committed. But now that the crime has been committed, there's somebody whose health is endangered. They are bleeding profusely. They are in danger because the contents of the uterus, the unborn child is dead. They need to be evacuated. So post-abortion care has to be managed well so that the doctors are able to save those who can be saved, regardless of the fact that what caused the distressing situation was a criminal offense. And I do believe that a lot of effort has been made and should continue to be made in that area of post-abortion care.
Charles, let me just step in with a follow-up question. And I think there's a lot of response specifically to the points that you're raising and the ones that you raised in the documentary with respect to how to be able to treat the situation as is. The point being that, you know, abortions don't happen in abstraction. Yes, there are certain societal drivers that we need to be able to address, but what the current pressure points are, you know, are also driven by the fact that, for instance, with you and the emphasis only on the penal code as opposed to other sections of the law when trying to define this subject, can be seen by people who are perhaps pro the expansion of safe abortion rights as being playing into the situation in a negative way, because as long as the emphasis is only on the penal code, then how can we have a discussion that is devoid of, you know, some of the stigma that comes with the question of abortion as seen only through the penal code lens? I'll give you just a respond, because I want to move on to Victor to talk to us about what's happening on the ground at the moment with respect to the people that he's working with who are at-risk groups. So
I think you'll notice that in the previous answer I gave, I did not mention the penal code at all, but it is true that the penal code exists where people go against the law. I think the principal law in Kenya is the Constitution of Kenya 2010, Article 26, which adopts the rights approach, the rights-based approach. And what I've tried to say is that the rights-based approach that has been adopted by our constitution is one which goes beyond or transcends this attempt to create a tension between the life of the mother and the life of the child by saying both of them are entitled to the right to life. And I think that is the approach that you should adopt. In terms of stigma, I do recognize and agree that indeed there is stigma in committing abortions. And because I have taught African jurisprudence and African law, in African legal tradition, stigma was one of the methods of enforcing the law or good conduct. So sometimes we use the word stigma as if it's a bad word, but stigma is actually a word that was very effective in traditional African societies in promoting good conduct. And it is very good to have stigma towards abortions because abortions are bad. They are wrong. When I'm talking about abortions, I'm talking about these illegal abortions where you are deliberately killing someone else. It's a form of murder. It's only that it's a murder of the child in the womb. It is the same way you don't to put stigma to rape. You don't to apply stigma to murder, manslaughter, to people who commit traffic offenses that endanger the lives of others. Stigma should be attached to abortion. It is a good thing to attach stigma to abortion. Once you've attached stigma to abortion, hopefully it will reduce the demand for abortion. But for those who still go ahead and procure abortions, either because of their own initiative or because of pressure from their parents, the father of the child, etc., all kinds of environmental pressures, then now we need to deal with that situation. First of all, by ensuring that post-abortion care is there for those who are endangered their health, and then trying to deal with those who are trying to reverse the stigma that society has put, because that stigma is what is safeguarding life. I'm very happy, for example, as I move around the streets, that there's a stigma to murder, because otherwise anyone might decide to chop off my head. So stigma for murder is good. It keeps us safe.
Point made.
Stigma for abortion is good. It keeps unborn children safe.
All right, point made. Victor, I'd like for you to weigh in on what Charles has said, but also talk to us from the point of view of the young adults that you work with and the adolescents that you work with, and also perhaps also talking to the subject of stigma around the question of abortion. And we'll come to you, Dr. Kagia.
Thank you very much, John. I think the first thing I want to reiterate is stigma kills. And so young people are unable to access information and access services because of stigma. And I think when we talk about access to safe and legal abortion, what you're talking about is that the safe abortion is carried out within the confines of the law. not out of the law. But you realize what we've seen in the documentary is there are quirks, and that points out to a broken regulatory framework as well as a broken law enforcement framework. But let's come back to young people. So it's a fact that we are hugely a young population, and that means there are several factors. And Ministry of Health in 2016, 2015 and 2016, 2015, there was the National Adolescent Reproductive Health Policy, and then there was the revised guidelines for the provision of adolescent and youth-friendly services. Recognizes that information plays a key role in enhancing young people's access good health-seeking behavior. And what we are witnessing today is there's a broken information sharing system. And if you look at the guidelines for the provision of the youth-friendly services, it looks at different models. It looks at the clinical-based model where young people can get services at the clinic. It looks at community-based model where there are community settings where young people can be able to get information about their sexual and reproductive health and rights. And it also looks at the school-based model because it recognizes that there are young people in school and therefore they need to get information to be able to make better and informed choices about sexual and reproductive health and rights. And finally, it recognizes that young people can also get information through the virtual-based model that, given the growing need and desire for and the expansion of the internet space. But when you look at it from that particular point of view, John, then we realize that our healthcare is not responding to the needs of young people as it should be. And the studies have shown that less than 10% of our healthcare system is friendly to young people. And that means young people are getting alternative information. The other thing we need to look at is then where is the social support system? And we are having a broken social support system where there is stigma. And we've seen people going out and saying, my father, if my parents know this, they will kill me and all that. And that means that stigma is pushing people to go to go and get services from quack. And the other thing is we cannot compare actually perforation of the womb of women and a medically approved procedure that is within the confines of law. Otherwise, what we are saying is even the law itself is a criminal, provides for, a criminal framework, which is not really true. And we know, for example, the High Court has pronounced itself on the JMM ruling in terms of looking at what are the grounds, definition of health, and many other things. And therefore, as we move forward, what needs to happen is the government must continuously invest in information for young people, healthcare that responds to the needs of the young people, and we must strengthen our social system to be able to support young people to make better choices and get the right information about their sexual and reproductive health and rights. Back to you, John.
All right. Thanks a lot, Victor. Dr. Kagia, I'd like to bring you in here and let's speak to the issue of information, right? So as it stands, the various laws that we have with respect to procurement of abortions, at least the circumstances under which an abortion can be procured, the person with the final say is a qualified medical professional. Now, as one, what's the kind of information that a young person who perhaps is in a situation where an abortion needs to be procured will receive from a medical professional? In the context where this perhaps isn't an abortion that is procured under the duress of, the duress of health effects or safety, what kind of advice would you, as a medical professional, give to a young person who is in this situation?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. It is very important. Information is power. Ignorance kills a lot of people. And one of the problems we have is many people don't look for the information from the right people. If you get a young person who is pregnant, and most of them, by the way, particularly adolescents, don't even know they are pregnant. It's you who will tell them after they tell you they have missed a period, you examine them, and then you discover she's got something in her tummy, and then further investigation shows that she's pregnant. This particular girl needs to be given the information about what is in her womb. Use the right language. If you listen to that tape clearly, almost every person talks about nilipata ball. Nilipata ball. The others usually go and say, I went and flashed. If you don't give the children or the young people information that what they are carrying is a baby, they are going to carry out a message of somebody who has no right and not a human being. So you got to explain to them that what you are carrying is actually a baby. Then you're going to explain to them what are the alternatives of that baby. They may tell you, my friend told me, Niedenika flash. I get very many like that. And you got to explain to her that you're not flashing. Flashing is only for poo-poo, something wasteful. But this is a baby who's growing inside you. And then you tell her the risks that they are taking. Let me tell you, most of the young people don't want to hear that when they are doing that, they can die. I don't know for what reason, young people fear death. So you tell them this is the things that can happen. You can bleed a lot. You can even die. You can get infected and all that. And then you may have other complications that when you have settled down, you may never be able to have a baby. They usually say no, because you have empowered them as to what is likely to happen to them. Then the next thing they say, but you know, I am going to be killed by my parents. They'll just, you know, she's a church elder. I'll be killed. And maybe they've been told by the parents that if you dare come here pregnant, I'll kill you. The parents, of course, doesn't mean so, I hope. But this child has that fear in the background. She has probably gone to her peers for peer counseling and has been told the only thing is that just go and flash and go. But if a health professional now takes time to talk to this girl, explain to them after examination, do an investigation, and probably the girl sees a heartbeat of a baby inside her, you'll find that most of them will not go for that abortion. When you talk about even that decision for an abortion, somebody rightfully said it's a medical condition, and the person who is dealing with it should be able to make a decision at the highest standard according to Article 43 of decision making. You know, we can very easily, in our run for safe abortion, have a lot of legalized quacks. You take somebody, give them a few weeks of learning of how to terminate a pregnancy, and within a short time, they are made qualified to do what they are calling safe abortion. And you end up with a lot of unsafe abortion. That girl can end up dying, actually, coming from that clinic.
Dr. Kagia, let me jump in and ask.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Okay, finish your point. Yeah.
Yes, my point is you have to be very careful of who is giving this girl the information, what is their background, because if they are the ones who will want to come and terminate a pregnancy, they will push the girl to terminate a pregnancy. But if they are balanced medical professionals who are trained to save life, they will be able to give facts that are useful, and that is what is expected. So let us not get to a point where we shall get a crowd of legalized quacks who will continue killing our girls.
Let me just chime in and give this to Nelly. And Nelly, as a healthcare and a practitioner, there's one thing that Dr. Kagia has alluded to, that we'll end up legalizing a lot of quacks to to work in the healthcare. I would like you to comment on this. But as somebody also who works in areas, the low income areas, what is the situation and what are the realities and how do we move from here?
Thank you, Victor. I think it is the Constitution of Kenya has been able to explain clearly who is a trained healthcare provider. And if we are able, I know the regulatory bodies know who are, who are within their bodies and who are supposed to provide what kind of services. So if we, for example, made abortion legal, I don't think it will be very difficult for the Ministry of Health to regulate who is providing, because the Constitution has defined who a trained healthcare provider is. And we have curriculums for each cadre of the medical practitioners. So in countries where we have, we do not have restrictive laws, as in Kenya, we see that the number of unsafe abortion cases are very low or almost zero, because then there's the right information, and people know where, women and girls know where to access information. They know when they need services. Providers don't have to, be scared in terms of being arrested and harassed by police officers. So as someone that works in the peri-urban areas, having providers that work in the peri-urban areas, the story is quite heartbreaking because girls lack information. They know there's a healthcare provider, but they know abortion is illegal because they don't have anyone who has been able to provide information and just be able to tell them what the Constitution says, what policies and guidelines do we have that support them when it comes to access to information and services. And this is the reason why, I repeat, the quacks have really, they're having a field day, because it is easy for information about quacks to, easily move around, and for young girls to be able to refer each other. We understand when peer need information, probably before they get to an older person or they even go to a facility, they would want to get information from their fellow peers. So most of the time, the kind of referrals they get is the quack. Ulienda wapi ukasaidiwa, nilienda kwa Japolo. Actually, they have a name for them. Nilienda kwa Japolo XYZ akanisaidia. Was it successful? Because for them, behind their mind, what they want is termination. And for reason one, stigma, and we have just said stigma kills. Number two, fear of being rejected by the parents. Number three, fear of being thrown out of school. And all this again speaks to, us having very beautiful policies, us having very beautiful laws, but just seeing the implementation of it becomes a problem. So for me, I would want to see a situation where it is very clear in terms of if, and we are not, saying that abortion should be provided on demand, but we are saying when a woman or a girl is in need of healthcare, of safe abortion services, then they should have the right information in terms of where do they go to access these services, especially those that don't have the privileges that people in the urban setups have. People in community are struggling every day, in the hard to reach areas, they are struggling, and that's why the quacks become, like the better option, quote, quote, and they end up losing their lives. So if we trained our healthcare providers and provided them with the right information, and I repeat, we know who the trained healthcare providers in Kenya are, and they've gone through their different curriculums for them to become nurse midwives, to become clinical officers, to become gynecologists, doctors, etc., etc. If we allowed the government to provide the training to them, if we allowed the implementation of the standards and guidelines that support reduction of maternal mortalities and morbidities, then, and we also ensured that commodities and supplies are available for these facilities, and I'm talking about both public and private, then we are not going to have the issue of unsafe abortion. we are going to see a reduction in the 7 digits that we see every day of women and girls dying, unless we want to say that we are a nation that is happy seeing our girls dying every day because of an issue that can be controlled.
Thank you, Nelly. Well, so we have a very animated conversation as well online. And one of the current issues that is coming out is around, so for instance, there is a comment that only women should be having deciding about, one is both deciding about their bodies, and two, even having this conversation that only women should be doing it. Which I like us to reflect as we move to conclusion. But there are a couple of comments that I also wanted to raise with us for our reflection. One is post-abortion care encouraging unsafe or safe abortion? I think Dr. Kagia could help us on that question.
Is unsafe abortion? Please ask the question again.
Is post-abortion care encouraging unsafe abortion or safe abortion?
Post-abortion care, it's encouraging good health, not encouraging safe or unsafe abortion. Because you're dealing with a person who has come with a medical problem, irrespective of how they got the problem, and you want to rescue their lives. So you don't discuss whether it is safe or unsafe. It is not encouraging anything in terms of abortion. It is encouraging good health for this particular woman.
Thanks for that. I mean, the other question there is actually to Victor. Lona Dia says, how are we comfortable with the fact that in this day and age, young women and girls do not know what is happening to them when they are pregnant? We are failing our young women and girls. I mean, as in your advocacy initiatives that you do, where is the gap? Is it societal? Is it parental? Is it the education system? And what is it that can be done to change the tide?
Thank you very much, Shitemi. So it is true we are failing the girls, and as I alluded earlier, the problem is young people do not have clearly defined channels for getting information. So they get wrong information consistently. And then the other thing is that even though we have very beautiful policies and guidelines, these policies and guidelines are not resourced for them to be able to comprehensively respond to the needs of young people in terms of getting the information they need to be able to make the healthy choices about their sexual and reproductive health. And then there is also the aspect of, in terms of the training of the medical health providers. And a lot of them are yet to be trained on the provision of youth-friendly services. And as we move forward, therefore, the government must resource the healthcare facility by looking at not only the infrastructure, but also looking at comprehensively in terms of the personnel, in terms of the commodities, in terms of convenience for young people, so that they can be able to make the right decision, and they can also be able to get the right and consistent information. The other thing is we must implement the laws, we must implement the policies that we have that govern the right to health, and we can't run away from them. And at the society level, we have to strengthen the societal support system that respond to sociological needs, psychological needs, and also that constant assurance devoid of stigma that there is a support system so that we don't have young people running to, they will say, Mamatoa and all these quacks that are endangering their lives. Back to you, Shitemi.
Thank you, Victor. One of the in the comment section, I think people have been quite critical of Kanjama, of basing considerable arguments solely on the Constitution, forgetting the existence of other laws that exist whether it's the Health Act. Of course, you also mentioned about the Penal Code. There's a very specific comment here from Wangari Ireri, where she's saying there is no specific rights-based approach that is created by a constitution. Human rights-based approach is universal, guided by specific principles. What would be your reaction to that?
You know, I'm speaking as a lawyer who has a lot of experience in constitutional law. Maybe the first thing I would tell our interlocutor is that the constitution is a supreme law of the land in Kenya. And it's not just in Kenya. Most countries in the world have a written constitution which prevails over any other law that may be inconsistent with the constitution. And in case you would like to check it out, Article 2, paragraph 4 of our constitution sets it out very expressly. I think the second thing I would like to tell our colleague, whoever has asked the question, is that constitutions world over include a section on the Bill of Rights. The first of the modern constitutions, modern written constitutions, is the Constitution of the United States of America that came into effect in 1789. And in that particular case, there was no Bill of Rights in the principal text of the Constitution. And they remedied the situation within 1 year or so when they passed 10 amendments that are called the Bill of Rights of the American Constitution. And after that experience, all other constitutions, as far as I know, incorporate a Bill of Rights. So it is actually accepted among legal practitioners that a constitutional law adopts a rights-based approach. Where the Kenyan Constitution has gone further is that it has recognized that unborn children are also proper subjects for enjoyment of human rights. And that is what is in Article 26, paragraph 2. This is very groundbreaking recognition. And it is something which hopefully other countries will adopt in future. And I can give a whole class on international human rights instruments, human rights bills in chapters in other constitutions, because I've done so, I've taught human rights. But what I want to say is that it is not meant to be controversial, the statement that a rights-based approach is appropriate in this circumstance. Okay. What I would also add is that a health-based approach is consistent with a rights-based approach if you apply the reasoning that Dr. Kagia has put forth, which is that we seek to safeguard the health of both the mother and the child. Really, the last thing I would like to say, Shitemi, before I conclude, is that there's an elephant in the room. And even as we are having our discussion and debate and dialogue, we are not confronting that elephant. And I think that's the problem, because all of us are aware that there are many countries in the world, Western countries, which allow abortion on request, or abortion in the first trimester for any reason, some abortion for 3 trimesters for any reason. And so there are many people who are listening to us who are thinking that there must be something wrong if we don't adopt that Western approach. They somehow don't believe that our Kenyan laws can actually be superior to Western laws on this issue. So they, because of that deeply held belief that if I can go and have an abortion on request in France, I can do so in Nairobi. Why are we insisting on our penal code? So that's the underlying issue. It's the elephant in the room that people are not addressing. And I'd like to confront it directly and say our Kenyan law is better than the law of France or United States on this topic. And it is actually consistent with the African cultural values, where we respect life. And it's not just a question of cultural values. It's a philosophical question. If you accept that life is precious from the moment of conception, why would you ignore it when you're coming up with health-based approaches or sociological approaches and so on? You would deal with them, try to reduce the danger to the woman, to the man, to society, without discounting that fundamental point that is in Article 26.2, that the unborn child has a right to life. They should be protected the way you protect yourself, the way I protect myself from any threat to my life. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I remember when conversations around the constitutions were quite heated up. One of the reasons as to why people were rejecting it was actually the writing that a trained medical practitioner, and that would give room for abortion to take place. I'd like us to give our closing comments by reflecting on, perhaps just in 1 minute each, reflecting on a comment that has been made by Sarah Ouma, who is saying, you need to understand that abortion will not stop happening. Make it accessible and legal. And perhaps I would start with Nelly.
I think my parting shot will be very simple. Yeah. There's a senior gynecologist who once said, in his very many years of practice, he's yet to see a woman who wakes up today and goes to have sex with an intention to get pregnant and then have the child aborted. Thank you.
Victor?
For Kenya to be able to harness the demographic dividend, we have to invest in the health and lives of young people, and especially young women, so that they can be able to make the right choices about their sexual and reproductive health and rights. Secondly, the government must continuously invest in the healthcare system to be able to respond to the needs of all citizens, but especially young people and women of reproductive age. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles?
I do agree that abortions will not stop happening. And because I'm a student of criminology and sociology, I will also add that social vices will not stop happening. They began with the creation, for those who believe in the Bible, with Adam and Eve, and they will end on the last day. Our job as policy people is to try to come up with circumstances and situations which can reduce rather than increase encouragement for crime to occur, can mitigate the consequences of those crimes, and can punish those who go out of their way to commit crime despite realizing the harm that crime has to society. And crime injures, first of all, the criminal. The murderer is injured. Maybe may not suffer physical injury, but they suffer psychological harm, they suffer spiritual harm, etc. And the same thing is true of all crimes, whether it is rape, whether it is evading rightful taxes, and so on. So my appeal to Kenyans is that, yes, abortions will continue happening, but we must continue insisting. As one reggae song repeats, abortion is a crime. Abortion is a crime. Abortion is a crime.
Dr. Kagia, your final word, please.
Mine is to say that we constantly remember that unplanned pregnancy, which is leading this girl to abortion, is not a medical problem. It is a social problem. And we should make sure that we give a social solution to this social problem to avoid complications that come from giving the wrong treatment to the wrong disease. We can do this through education. We can do this through supporting of those who have become pregnant. We support them by giving them good medical care, even if they go through abortion, get complications, and finally make sure that our legal system supports them together with that unborn child. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to each and every one of you. You have been with us for perhaps close to 2 hours. First, the documentary itself and this conversation. We take it not for granted that you've stood with us and as well made your worthy contributions during this time. Clearly, this is a conversation that perhaps is not beginning today, but must continue as we seek to bridge and reduce whether the criminal elements, but also the fatalities and the pain that our young girls, mothers, and parents go through. We hope to continue this and having such and similar conversations which are quite important for moving society forward. Thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.